And if you happen to be after a decent mid-range smartphone right now, the choice is somewhat overwhelming. It's a veritable Vegas buffet, except hopefully none of the options will keep your arse glued to the toilet for 12 hours straight. And this here Poco F7 Pro is one of the fresher options, boasting slick gaming skills and impressive media creds, just like the more expensive Poco F7 Ultra, but for the even nicer price of just 500 quid. But should you do that? Pay money for it? Not that I'm saying you should nick it, obviously, just like, is it worth it, or should you buy something else? Anyway, I'm gonna grab another pint of coffee and then let's do a review. Now first up, the design of the Poco F7 Pro, pretty similar to that Ultra, to the point where you could almost mix them up, just a few subtle differences. One of the most obvious is you don't get the funky gold trim around the camera bump, and also the back end of the Poco F7 Pro is completely flat, whereas the Ultra model was slightly curved at the edges, which made it a bit more comfortable to clutch. But besides that, very similar. You've got pretty skinny bezels surrounding that near 6.7 inch display. Thankfully, Poco hasn't ditched the metal frame, which just gives it a bit more of a premium vibe. And then around back, it's the same two-tone glass finish, which certainly seems to be dividing opinions. Personally, I'm not really a fan of the Poco F7 series aesthetics. I think it's a bit too down to business, a bit too corporate-y. But then what I know about beauty could be comfortably written on an ant's G-string. And to be fair, you can also grab the Poco F7 Pro in silver or blue, which might be slightly more exciting and thrilling than this fairly bog standard black effort. And to be fair, at least the matte finish of this bottom section does a great job of repelling fingerprints and greasy, grimy nastiness. And up front, the Pro is protected by a bit of Gorilla Glass 7i, plus there is a screen protector slapped on there too. And this phone is IP68 water and dust resistant, which is becoming rather common for mid-range mobiles, which is great to see. A little bit of peace of mind if you're using this thing in the bath, you got it propped up next to the sink when you're doing the washing up, whatever. But what is still very rare for a mid-range smartphone is the ultrasonic fingerprint sensor that Poco has slapped on the F7 Pro, an absolutely fantastic addition. A definite upgrade over the usual optical efforts, because even if your hands are quite dry, quite moist, quite grubby, still has absolutely sod all problem recognizing you. But no real surprises on the software front. As usual, Xiaomi's HyperOS version 2 slapped on here on top of Android 15. With the promise of 4 Android OS updates and also 6 years of security patching to look forward to. And of course, even though it is quite the improvement over that old MIUI launcher shenanigans, not everyone really gets on with HyperOS. For one, you've got a bladder-punchingly aggravating amount of crapware stuffed on this thing. It really is a horrific situation. No exaggeration, dozens and dozens of the buggers slapped on here. Thankfully, you can uninstall practically all of these. The likes of Booking.com, Facebook, LinkedIn, AliExpress. All the usual offenders are slapped on here, so set aside a good half hour or so to get rid of them all. Of course, all the usual HyperOS shenanigans going on as well, the wee quirks, like for instance not getting notifications from an app until you dive into the app settings and tweak the background management. A couple of times the smartphone has just decided that it really can't be arsed and just hibernated all by itself, which, you know, I don't really blame it. I've been there a couple of dozen times just this morning alone. And one time the always on display started flickering madly like it was having some sort of seizure. Not really sure what was going on there. Doesn't seem to have repeated it since. But yeah, it's essentially the exact same setup you'll get on the likes of the Xiaomi 15 flagships and that Poco F7 Ultra, including a good bit of Xiaomi Hyper AI. So yes, you got the speech recognition, the interpretation, the subtitling, translation, yada yada yada. This all works absolutely fine. The transcription and the subtitling, of course, is occasionally fooled by slightly different accents. As with the likes of me, it doesn't have a f***ing clue what to do, frankly. As usual, the most useful stuff is the AI bits that Google has built into Android, like Circle to Search. Quick and easy way of finding information on anything you spy. Bugger all complaints on the storage side. You've got 256 gigs base, which you can expand if you want to by throwing a bit more cash at Poco. It's just 50 quid to upgrade as well, which is pretty generous. However, while the Poco F7 Pro does have space in the SIM tray for 2 SIMs, there is bugger all eSIM support on here, which I would expect from a sort of upper mid-range smartphone these days. Even just a regular mid-ranger, it's disappointing when you don't see that, because if you do a lot of traveling, that eSIM support comes in really, really handy. But I'll stop me moaning for the 6.67-inch AMOLED display, which is basically the same panel as what Poco slapped on the F7 Ultra. The 3200 by 1440 pixel resolution keeps everything supremely crisp. You'll just have to remember to activate that in the display settings. And like the Ultra, the Poco F7 Pro boasts full HDR10 and Dolby Vision streaming support. You got an impressive selection of color options to piddle about with in the display settings if you're not a fan of the regular mode, including a bit of P3 and sRGB action. Personally, I did swap it from the original Color Pro mode to the Vivid mode. Really like those poppy, vibrant visuals. Particularly good for that animated fare. And on high brightness mode, this panel hits roughly 1800 nits, and I found it was comfortably bright enough to use even in proper full-on sunshine, even when I was wearing sunnies. Although, as with the Ultra, those colours are generally quite saturated when the brightness levels hit their peak. You got 3840Hz PWM dimming on here if you are sensitive to a bit of OLED flicker, and all the usual eye comfort shenanigans as well if you are whiling away the wee hours with a healthy bit of doom scrolling. And the screen maxes out at 120Hz refresh, so pleasingly nippy, barring the occasional wee bit of juddering from good old HyperOS, of course. I also found that screen was pleasingly responsive when it was quite moist, so no worries if you are caught in a bit of a rainstorm, you're checking your emails in the shower or whatever. All the swipes and pokes still seem to register quite easily. And the stereo speakers are once again a pair of super loud bangers, easily powerful enough to fill a small room with sound. Vocals come through nice and crisp and clear, got a respectable amount of bass. All good, and the Bluetooth streaming's been absolutely fine as well. I had one occasion where my YouTube video kept pausing, which I think was down to the Bluetooth buds being slightly damp. I think it was balking up the touch controls. Apart from that, absolutely no worries. Now, the Poco F7 Pro is powered by the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, exactly the same as the OnePlus 13R. And just like your mum, this chipset might be getting on a wee bit, but it still knows how to satisfy. And that's backed here in the UK models by 12 gigs of RAM. Now, everyday running, of course, still absolutely fine as you'd expect from a flagship Qualcomm chipset. And the Poco F7 Pro will happily contend with a bit of gaming, even for hours at a time. It's my usual benchmark. Wuthering Waves ran absolutely perfectly, even when I chucked the graphics settings up to the top levels. Flicked on HyperOS's Wild Boost mode, and ran around this slightly peculiar world, bashing lots and lots of stuff right in the ghoulies. The frame rate stuck at just under 60 frames per second for the majority of the gameplay. I certainly didn't notice a single judder or stumble in that frame rate, even when things got proper hairy. And despite gaming for well over an hour on numerous occasions, the liquid cool Vortec kept the Poco F7 Pro from getting too warm. And like the Poco F7 Ultra, the Poco F7 Pro also boasts brilliant battery life. In fact, it's even better here because you've got an upgraded 6000 mAh capacity battery. Now, to give you an idea of just how good it's been, I have of course been using this as my full-time smartphone. My SIM has been lodged in there for just over a week now, and I've been punishing this thing at least 6 or 7 hours of screen on time every single day. Lots of audio streaming when it has been hibernating. When it's been awake, it's been streaming video, I've been Skyping on this thing, I've been testing out the camera, and only in one day did I actually manage to get it down into the battery saver mode. It just hit 20% just as I was stumbling into bed. And that was only because I've been gaming on Wuthering Waves for 2 hours that day, as well as using the camera and everything else. Most days, I honestly stagger into bed with at least 40% charge remaining. It is the gaming that slays it a bit faster than I expected, though. Typically drops around 25% that battery charge with a full hour of Wuthering Waves. That is with the Wild Boost performance and everything else switched on, all the graphics maxed out, etc. If you don't do that, then, this thing will happily survive a full weekend on a single charge. The good news is, even if you are addicted to Wuthering Waves or Genshin Impact or whatever, well, no worries. You've got 80 watt wide charging support here, so not quite as nippy as the Ultra, but bung a cable in it for just 40 minutes and it'll basically recharge from empty to full. However, unfortunately, no wireless charging. Sad face. Alright kiddies, let's finish up this Poco F7 Pro review with a bit of a squint at that camera tech. And Poco has actually stuck with the same 50 meg Light Fusion 800 sensor that it used for the Poco F7 Ultra, but where it differs from the Ultra is the disappointing limited selection of alternative sensors. All you've got on here is a basic 8 megapixel ultra wide angle shooter, bugger all telephoto snapper, so when you do zoom in it's basically just digital cropping. A few other smartphones at this sort of mid-range price point do offer a telephoto shooter, so for instance the Nothing Phone 3A and 3A Pro both recently launched, cheaper than this bad boy but with that zoom option. But the good news is that shutter speed is still pleasingly nippy even when you're frantically jabbing away non-stop. And as a result, the Poco F7 Pro is a solid choice for those family snaps involving kids and pets. My action stills came out well with next to no blurring unless the lighting was particularly balls. And you've got the usual fully adjustable portrait mode with a tweakable bokeh effect for smudging that backdrop. Photo results are unsurprisingly similar to the Ultra model. Your HDR situations are once again coped with cleanly. It's pretty rare to see any kind of obvious saturation here, with colours generally well reproduced. In softer light, my test photos also looked good. Got enough finer detail in there so things don't get too fuzzy when you're viewing back the pics on a monitor, with only the occasional spots of grain when the situation gets really murky. And yes, you can digitally zoom into a scene with the Poco F7 Pro in lieu of an actual telephoto shooter. Just don't pinch in beyond the sort of 3 to 4 times zoom level, as the detail levels do drop right off. And that ultra wide snapper is merely fine. It's a nice to have if you want a more dramatic viewpoint or whatever. And for your video style shenanigans, well, you've got an auto video mode as usual, which captures footage at up to 8K resolution at 24 frames per second, otherwise 4K at 30 or 60 FPS. And you've also got Xiaomi's rather brilliant director mode if you want a bit more manual control. It allows you to tweak the white balance, the focus, the shutter speed, the ISO levels. Got quite a few different options you can play around with, like some focus peaking, etc. You do have the option of recording in log as well if you want to do a bit of post editing. Of course, you are once again slightly limited by the lack of extra telephoto options, etc. here on the Poco F7 Pro. But you know what, on the 4K resolution level, got nice crispy visuals, and audio is cleanly collected from all areas, as long as there's bugger all wind interference, which the Poco F7 Pro doesn't really cope with particularly well. And then with the front-facing selfie camera, you can record up to 1080p Full HD footage. There is no 4K option, which isn't particularly pro, but stabilization is excellent. The audio pickup, again, fine as long as there's no blustery conditions or anything, so certainly for a bit of video chatting and all of that, good stuff. And there you have it, kiddies. That is your Uncle Spurt's full final frank review of the Poco F7 Pro. So as you can see, most of the benefits of that Ultra model, the performance slightly scaled back, was still more than capable for your gaming shenanigans. Battery life is absolutely stellar. Top-notch media creds as well. Of course, not everyone will get on with HyperOS, and a couple of wee things that kind of irks me, like the lack of eSIM support. And of course is lacking the flexible camera setup of rivals like the Nothing Phone 3A Pro. But overall, really enjoyed using it this past week. That's what this haggard, knackered old twat reckons anyway. But it'd be great to hear your thoughts on the Poco F7 Pro down in the comments below. Would you grab this, or would you grab a rival like the Nothing Phone 3A Pro? Would you upgrade to the Ultra? Definitely let us know. Please do poke subscribe, ding that notifications bell for more on the latest and greatest tech, and have yourselves a ruddy, wonderful rest of the week. Cheers everyone, love you.